Yes, sir. Hello there. Welcome everybody to this month's Humpday Hangout for Chief Lasky, myself, Chief Salka, Chief Thompson. Chief Lasky is out doing something. I guess he liked those people better than he liked us. But he's got something going on today. And anyway, we're live here and got a great guest for us to talk about a really interesting research project and a bunch of interesting data that I think most people are going to find really interesting in this line of work. And so we're real excited to get with Brian Brush here in just a minute. Before we do, I want to throw it to Bobby real quick, and let's talk a little bit about FDIC and remind everybody about the most amended dates and how folks can get registered for that if they're still kicking those tires.
Yeah, so we're having summer school this year. It's going to be in August, the first week of August. So the 2nd through the 7th, and everybody you see on this screen will be there. So it's going to be a great time, and got 200 classes lined up. We got 21 hands-on training classes planned. We got 86 workshops. So it's going to be the regular dates. Keynoting is Steve Chikarotis. We've got then after then the Conley brothers are on Thursday, and we've got John Alston's going to be our featured speaker on Thursday. So we've got great lineup for that. We got the Fool's Bash is on, the Stair Climb is on, the Comedy Night is on. So it's going to be kind of like it'd be like FDIC though. It's going to be in the summer. So sign up, registration's open, hotels are open. And the reason we moved it up 2 weeks is so that we can have the whole town to ourselves in the normal schedule. And so Fun Run is on, everything's getting lined up. It's going to be great. And then call for presentations is out for 2022. So if you want to come teach in 2022, go to Fire Engineering or go to FDIC.com and put in your presentation for 2022. We'll be making all those selections, and we'll be announcing that like in September. So right after summer school, we'll be announcing the lineup for 2022, which will be the normal April dates. We'll be back in April in the convention center. So everything's going like gangbusters and on time and squared away. Talked with the folks and got all the properties secured, and Writ Under Fire is on. So the Illinois Fire Services Institute is doing a special one-day program of their Writ Under Fire training class, which is phenomenal. It'll be in Champaign, so we'll bus you out of Indy to Champaign, Illinois, and then bus you home after the class. So phenomenal opportunity to take some phenomenal training. All the usual suspects will be there. A brand new after hours program featuring Rick Lasky and John Salka and John Norman and Bill Gustin and myself will be premiering on Wednesday evening, and dress is optional. So we'll see you all there, and that'll be kind of fun. So we got some new stuff coming, and a lot of your tried and true favorites. But Brian, I'm trying to coerce Brian into doing a special presentation of this, and I think I've got him on the hook. I think he's willing to do it. So Brian will be doing an expanded version of the study he's doing right now, and the rescue study that he's doing, which I think has got tremendous implications for a lot of what we do on the Fireground. So that's my what do you call that? My pitch. That's my pitch. So register now.
Yeah. Hey, my hat's off to that, your entire group, Bobby. I can't imagine the logistical dance that goes on to put FDIC on, but to have to go through what you did when you had to cancel, but then to put this thing back on, now you got to move some dates, and like you just said, it's a full plate, it's full offering. And I think everyone or anyone who's been knows exactly what you're going to get when you show up in Indianapolis. So
well, the secret, Brian, is we employ mostly very young people like myself, a man of only 25 years of age, obviously able to do those extensive.
Yep. So anyway, that'll be great to see that back alive and well. And I know that if there's anyone out there who's hesitant about traveling, we certainly understand all that. But you've got a few more months to grind through this, and certainly I think at least in our area, the numbers and everything looks better, and our travel restrictions have been lifted, and we're trying to ease back into that sense of normalcy. So. Be great to see FDIC alive and well, and certainly some great programs for everyone. I want to jump right into this month's topic. So Chief Thompson shot this over and had heard about what Brian Brush was doing, part of a research project. So and it's a really interesting topic. And like I kind of prefaced earlier, I'm very much a data person. I like numbers. I like solid information, and I think that's one of the best ways to guide you through a lot of things in life, and certainly in this business, I think data speaks volumes. So, Brian, I wonder if you could just tell us about what your Fireground Civilian Rescue, the project, why'd you start it? Give us a little background, and then let's dive into what we've learned or what you've learned so far. And before we start, did you, if I got this right, we're in the infancy of what you're doing, what you're putting together, but you released this to kind of help us today in this program. Is that true? You released some of this information?
Yes, sir. The current project is essentially the practicum for my master's program at Oklahoma State University. So I've been in the program for years. I'm obviously very into the fire service, a self-proclaimed fire service nerd. And I've been tracking a lot of the things that the Firefighter Rescue Survey has been doing. Firefighter Rescue Survey is a place where firefighters can go and report the firsthand information that they have from the rescues of civilians that they're involved with. To give you a parallel, it's kind of just like firefighternearmiss.com. We learn a lot from the direct reports of what kept people out of trouble and what they experienced. So Firefighter Rescue Survey has been around for about 5 years now. They started in 2016, and they've been collecting information on civilian rescues when they occur, but we've never really known how many of them are occurring. So while we're getting this information back of where the firefighters found the victim, what conditions they were in, what the method of removal was, that's all great information, but we just didn't have an idea on how many times civilians were being rescued by firefighters. So I've been messing around with this idea of doing this project for several years. I've worked through it with the professors in my program, and kind of wanted it to be the culmination of my degree program at Oklahoma State. And this semester is that semester. On January 1st, I started a active collection program of kind of mirrors the U.S. Fire Administration. U.S. Fire Administration has a civilian home fire fatality tracker on their website. They collect all the reports of civilian fire fatalities in the news every 24 hours through news alerts. So I mirrored that program, set it up to my email inbox, but for firefighter rescues. And I would get 30 to 40 emails a day with these key alerts that firefighters rescued this or firefighters saved that. A lot of those are pets. A lot of that is property. So it took some time, probably about 2 hours every day, to filter through and just distill out the rescues by firefighters, the direct interventions by firefighters in PPE that remove civilians from fire occupancies. And it's just been an amazing process. I had to kind of cap it at 90 days, January, February, and March, so that way I could get the project to completion and turn it in for the semester. So a little bit of that self-serving, I just spent it on a semester thing. But Chief Thompson reaching out to me last week, I put the pedal to the metal and I got the project completed, and I released that report to the fire service with some pictures added to it, dressed up a little bit, removed some of the academic stuff. And the full academic document went to the university for my practicum. And I just got word just before this that it's looking good, and I'll be graduating on May 7th.
Excellent. Well, congratulations for starters. That's quite an arduous process. I can relate to you there, but this is some interesting stuff. So I guess real quick, I know you kept the information that you had. You mentioned 3 months worth of data that you used, and that was obviously to complete your academic project. So now that that's done, do you have plans to continue to analyze or I guess, gather data and continue to analyze it in this regard?
Yeah, it's been a really great experience. I mean, this 90 days is a really good capture. You know, I feel pretty confident in what we were able to track in the 90-day period. I was able to record and confirm 881 civilian rescues, which is, it's amazing. I mean, that's 9.8 a day. So almost 10 times a day, firefighters are removing civilians from fires. That's been extremely valuable. This whole time, the Firefighter Rescue Survey has still been a source of a resource for people to input the greater surveys. With these rescues, when they would come in, I would collect them. I'd look at which department was involved in it, and then I would send them an email and ask them to respond with a Firefighter Rescue Survey. And of the 881 rescues that I recorded, we got surveys back on 247 rescues. So 28% of these rescues, we were getting detailed information from those departments and those firefighters. And that's where the extremely valuable data is. You know, on my level, collecting it from the news report, I can track how many were rescued, the type of occupancy, the city that it was in. But when you have 28%, we're getting back all the way down to the conditions that the victims were found in, behind a closed door, how they were removed by drag, by ground ladder. It is truly amazing how much we're getting back on that. So yes, the first 90 days of the year is what I captured. We really tried to ramp it up. I think that the goal would be for 2022 to work on getting a full year of data. I think that that's an important part of it, so we can see if there was seasonal influences, if there's regional influences, those types of things that may have been factors. But really, my point is to just kind of demonstrate the need for it and the value. You know, I can't truly see this thing all the way through as a father of three and a husband and a training chief and a student. I can commit so much time to it, but I think the fire service needs to identify and recognize that this is a critical capture of ours. When we look at our past and tracking just civilian fire fatalities and just losses, it doesn't necessarily mean that a firefighter or a fire department was involved in that. There's a lot of civilian fire fatalities where the fire department was never involved in it. They're post-incident body recoveries, or they're discovered at a later date. But by definition, a firefighter rescue, a firefighter is involved in that action, directly in contact with that civilian. And that's really where we will track our performances. I think the concentration in the fire service, and understandably so, when we look back to when all of our metrics were set with America Burning, the focus was on preventing. And, you know, absolutely, that's our number one goal, is to prevent incidents. But since, you know, the birth of man, we've not been able to overcome fire. It still happens, it still occurs. And when the fires do occur, that's when we need to measure the impact of operations. And we've really kind of not done a very good job of capturing the impact of operations. So when we think about the reduction in fires, we've had a 50, 60, 70% reduction in fires over the last 20 or 30 years. That is the rescues for the prevention officers. What we need to capture now is what interventions and how much of an impact we're having on the operational level. And that really starts when the fire starts.
You know, I think it's really a fantastic piece of work. First of all, it's posted, if you're listening to this, it's posted on the link just below where you click to come onto the Hangout today. So if you go to fireengineering.com, you can download the PDF of Brian's work. So I highly recommend that you do. But you're right, Brian. And even with just 247, I think you said responded, or out of the 800. So if you extrapolate out based on the data you were able to collect, at least 10 rescues a day, and that doesn't count like the assisted evacuations, which without that assistance could turn into a need for rescue. When you think about the mid-rise and the high-rise fires where we evacuate buildings that have umpteen dozens of persons in them, those are really interesting statistics, right? And I think that I love what you did. I love the idea of trying to capture an entire year and getting even more capture. But I think the data is important too, because we all grew up on the left, the right-hand search and the left-hand search, you go along the wall, but we all knew that, they were behind the door, or they were in the bathroom, or they're in the hallway, or, nowadays we find a lot of people heading to the garage because that's the way they come into the house. So, you find them by the, in that little like laundry room, or, the little entry to the garage, because that's how they come in and out of their homes now, with the electric garage door opener, and right into their homes. So that's how they go out, in an emergency, they go out the same way. So I'm thrilled, and we'll support you any way you want to do 2022. We're all in. We'll help you.
Well, I appreciate that, Bobby. I think one other thing that's kind of interesting is, and I was a little bit kind of frustrated at first that we only had 28% response, and we were only getting, the 247 rescues, because I would talk to some of these fire chiefs, and they were so proud to share the information. When you think about contacting an organization and contacting a fire chief to get more information, there's no prouder moment than when their people made a rescue. So of course they want to share the information, and we get great information. But then in the last week, in wrapping this up, I tracked down U.S. Fire Administration data and INFRS data and NFPA, and the United States data collection. INFRS is and U.S. Fire Administration has pretty much said that they're only really capturing about 31% of the fatal fires. They're only getting true information into their system on about 31% of the fatal fires. So when we look at us capturing just through this method, this early, as Terry put it, the infancy of this program, 28% of the rescues, that's really, really encouraging. We're right on par with getting that detailed data about the rescues in its infancy. So if we can, through better awareness and more enthusiasm, collect even a higher percentage, say 50% of these rescues, we will be making some significant changes in our operational guidelines.
I got a couple of questions. If that's is that okay? Are we good to ask questions, or?
Yes. Let's go to John Salka, and he has a question for the panel. Yes, sir. Okay. Absolutely.
So my first question is, other than the academic element, which obviously you're involved in that, so what is the goal of all of this collection of information on rescues and the numbers, and the value of getting a whole year coming up in 22? So what's the purpose of that? Are we moving towards are we trying to affect tactics, or are we going to look and say, well, maybe we need to make some changes in the way we do things, or are we simply trying to collect information and add it to the other groups of information that we already do collect on fire reports and things of that nature?
Well, Chief, at the task level, at the data level, there's a lot of things that we can pull from this to support things that are currently going on. So right now, there's the close before you doze messages out there. UL saying they're trying to tell our citizens to close the door to protect themselves. Well, all that's been done in the laboratory, because we obviously can't test those theories on actual civilians. So from these reports, we're finding that about 32% of the victims are found behind closed doors, but they have a much, much higher survival rate than those found in open compartments. So that alone supports the close before you doze. What we'd like to see is 10 years from now, the percentage of the victims found behind closed doors is much higher. Then we can, say specifically that, hey, this message has been getting out to people. More and more people are closing the doors, and more people are surviving. So there's that end of it. Then enter search as a tactic, as a removal tool. Then enter search, we're only about 25% of rescues are done by Then Enter Search, but Then Enter Search has probably the highest survival rate. It's almost, I believe, man, I wish I would have been on this a little bit better. It's 85% survival rate for the victim removal for Then Enter Search, where you only have like a 53% survival rate for that traditional right-hand, left-hand search. So again, Chief, it's really, really early on for us to make any recommendations on this. It would be good to have several years of it. But my ultimate goal is to make people more vigilant. It's really tough with civilian fire fatalities. As we said, that we can't, just because a civilian fire fatality occurs doesn't mean that the fire department was even there or involved in it. And I've been to a lot of civilian fire fatalities, a lot of fatal incidents all around. And the officer will kind of pat you on the back and say, there's nothing you could have done. And I understand their intent in that. We try to, I guess, dehumanize these events a little bit. So that way it's easier for us to take care of it. But really, what we need to do is kind of flip the whole narrative on the fire service and say, hey, in a time where you're being told that we're going to fewer fires, in a time where you're being told that there's nothing you can do about these civilian fire fatalities, what we need to start telling you is that you can make a difference. Your training has value. You make a difference in the outcome. And we've never been able to say that. I've come into the firehouse before and I've seen the numbers on the door that 10 civilians died in fires yesterday. And I've seen that on the board for years and years and years. You know what would get me out of the bed in the morning would be to wake up when my alarm clock goes off and get a text message that says 10 civilians were rescued by firefighters yesterday. That's going to motivate me to go into work and be a part of that. That's going to drive me to be a little bit more involved. When I know that 10 civilians are being removed from house fires every day by firefighters, I know that my time is coming. It's going to be a more vigilant message, a more positive message, a more engaging message for the fire service in a time where complacency is probably our greatest enemy.
Just one more follow-up on that then. So do you think long-term, as a result of this study that you're doing in the work and whatever it morphs into, obviously we all know about 3,000 civilians die every year in fires in the United States, and you sort of just turned a light on for me. I always imagined that 3,000 people died at fires that the fire department was somehow involved in, and obviously you're saying that's not true. There may be somewhere the fire department wasn't even there or responded later. However, I can't think of anybody on this panel or anybody listening that is in any way, shape, or form satisfied or happy with 3,000 people dying in the United States every year in fires. I mean, everybody loses their minds when we go up from 38 to 48 firefighters that die, yet 3,000, that's 1,000 3 times, die every single year. And you look at the numbers, it goes back 20 years or longer, on or about 3,000. So my question is, do you think that the rescue numbers, the removal and rescue numbers, you're starting now, 2021, do you think in 1921 and 1961 and 1991, do you think the numbers were similar? I mean, obviously it doesn't matter. That's history, and we'll never know what the numbers are. But I view this rescue and removal thing, this firefighter rescue, sort of like as a parallel thing. It's going on at the same time as the firefighter fatalities are, not firefighter, the civilian fatalities are going on. And I'm wondering if enlightening ourselves about these numbers and documenting it and collecting the data, I still want it to cross over. I still want what you're doing to affect the 3,000. If it doesn't affect the 3,000, knowing all these numbers is just going to be another book on my shelf. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not minimizing your work. I'm saying I think just us being aware of how many rescues we're making, that's not good enough for me. If we didn't know that we were saving 2,000 people a year and now we know it, I feel a little bit better. But if there's still 3,000 people dying, that's the number I'd like to somehow turn the work you're doing into something that can be used maybe to reduce those numbers.
But
yes, Chief.
I'm sorry, Brian, and I wanted to throw this to Scott because that's a great. Scott, I know where you stand on this. We've had hours of discussion about. I don't want to use the word being aggressive, but what our primary job is, and we are there to protect people, put out fires, save lives, all of those things. But there has been a noticeable. I don't know if shift is the right word, but there has been a noticeable change in I don't know, tactics, focus, what our primary role is, sort of things like I don't know the really what the way I want to describe it. I can't. But to me, when I read this report, what it does say to me is that you can make a difference. You can, and the whole mindset of, and we were talking about this before the show started, of what is the survivability? We make a judgment on what the survivability is inside of a structure. Well, they were gone. There wasn't anything we could do. And that sort of mindset maybe slows people down, maybe alters that notion that your primary objective is to get in there and affect a rescue if you can do that. But Scott, I throw this to you because you articulate this way better than I do, and I think you've got a particular kind of passion for this kind of mindset, I guess.
Oh, thank you, Terry. And first of all, I think we need to make aggression cool again. You know, it was my generation that kind of screwed that up and made aggression a bad thing on the Fireground. But I think sensible aggression needs to be one of our goals. This is one of the things. I haven't known Brian real long, but I've known him pretty good for a short while. And one of the things that Brian pointed out was that even while fires are going down, the fire fatalities are not in relation to that. So we even though, you know, chiefs love to run around and say fires are down, fires are down, fires are down, and whatever that means from whatever point in time. But as to what John said, we still have a very high number of fire fatalities. We have a ton of room to improve. And I'm going to, again, I think I might've done this as show in the past, but I'm going to bring it up here again. You know, if I would have sat here a year ago and said, they're going to be talking about defunding the police, y'all would have said I was crazy. We're the next biggest piece of the pie. At some point, all this data, at some point, somebody's going to realize that with all this investment we make in every fire department, the greatest investment is in firefighting capabilities. I don't care if you're the smallest volunteer, FDNY, the majority of the money is spent on firefighting capability, the trucks, the gear, the deer. And there's got to be a return of value to that. And pretty soon somebody's going to look at what we're investing in civilian fire rescue capabilities and the results. And I fear that, you know, we're the next biggest piece of the pie, and what we're investing and what the return is, the books don't balance out. So what I like about this with what Brian's doing is certainly as a motivator, you know, I'm a big preparedness guy, and our firefighter fatalities, our civilian rescues really start in a firehouse. Our level of preparedness, our training, all our commitments, our policies and procedures. So if we focus on that number of fires going down, yet not matching the reduction in civilian fatalities, to me, that's huge. What this does is it defines that picture a little better. Am I right, Brian, on kind of, hey, we still lose way too many civilians, but let's talk about where they're dying, how they're dying, when they're dying, and focus on that as kind of a target to reduce that overall number of 3,000 plus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Chief Salka, I want to come back to what you're talking about, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there's not acceptable. 3,000 civilians is not acceptable losses. You know, we do not feel that way at all. What I will say is, unfortunately, for the American Fire Service, that's not been the concentrate. It's been the concentrate of us operationally, but not on the data collection side. So we need to identify that when America Burning was put out in the 70s, and not to age you, but I know that you're familiar with it. It was a major fire problem. It was the war years in the urban cities. It was pre-SCBA. It was pre a lot of things that are the modern fire service, but it defined the modern fire service. It set the intervention methods. It set the projections. It set a lot of things on the future of where we're at. So what you're talking about, you are correct. We have been tracking civilian fire fatalities, the number of fires since the 70s when America Burning set up infers and all this stuff. We have reduced the number of fatalities, we've reduced the number of fires, but they haven't completely gone away. I think back then, interior operations was not widespread. Rescue as an intervention was not an option. Our primary options were attempting at reducing fires and preventative mechanisms. Today, the modern fire service is an interior fire service. We know more about our fire environment than we ever have before. We know more about civilian outcomes than we ever have before. We have greater medical abilities than we ever had before. This is the time where we need to kind of reset everything. So when you're talking about this, Chief, I agree. When you think about, you're asking, you'd be curious to know if these have impacted. We don't know, but I can tell you that in the 20s, interior rescues were probably really, really low. I wouldn't be surprised, and I talked to a lot of different chiefs, and anecdotally, they say they feel like there's more rescues now than there ever have been. I think the only place that we could look would be in FDNY and say, in the last 10 years, are we saving more people or less? Because the FDNY is one of the only organizations in the country that truly tracks their rescues and recognizes their rescues internally. So, but I believe that we are rescuing more people every day. I believe that the tools, the technology, the training is putting us in better position to execute rescues now versus 20 years ago. So I want this information to prove that out. That's my feeling. I have a lot of anecdotal ideas, but we need the information to be collected to track that win-loss record. I'll be honest with you right now, all we can say is that in 1985, we lost 6 games. And in 1995, we lost 3 games. And in 2015, we lost 1 game. That doesn't mean we're a better team if we're playing less games. What we want to know is, what is our win record? If we're now a 12-1 team, then we're doing pretty good. When we look at 3,000 civilian fire fatalities every year, we just look at that number, but we forget to think that the population of the country is growing too. So when we look at the overall population, you got to look at a lot of different data. You got to look at deaths per million. Is that dropping? So I think if we have some type of new metric, if we can track our wins, we can track our strategies, our tactics. When we think about this stuff on the improving those civilian outcomes, Chief, like you're talking about, let's be honest, there's a lot of people out there who still believe that then enter search is a dangerous operation. But we can now start to show you that I have not been able to find a then enter search line of duty death. But I can show you right now that of the 25% of civilian rescues by firefighters through then enter search, the survival rate is 84%.
So
I can show you that if we
pick up
search right hand, left hand, the survival rate is 53%. So when we talk about safety, we are here for the citizens. And the better outcome is a then enter search operation. When we look at overall numbers as far as data collection, over the last 5 years, the line of duty death ratio for firefighters interior, so the number of firefighters dying inside structure fires for the last 5 years has been less than 1 per 100,000. The civilian fire fatality rate has been increasing from the mid 7 per 1,000 up to about 8 per 1,000 house fires. So we really have to start getting things together, taking to these chiefs and these professional organizations the same information that drives their EMS response, and that's outcome based. We need to show the chiefs that it is okay to risk more because we will save more. Because right now we're not risking much in comparison to what is on the table.
Two things real quick. And I agree with you completely, Brian. So a couple of different ways to look at things. For years and years and years, safety has been defined by the absence of something. In other words, no accidents, or only 5 accidents over a year, or something like that. Well, that's garbage. It tells you nothing. That the absence of something doesn't mean that you couldn't have a catastrophic accident the next day and have 55,000 injuries. I mean, it's just that stupid a metric, right? So we always look for the absence of something. What Brian is talking about, no. Let's talk about the actual rescues. Let's talk about the actual successes. And I'll tell you right now, 53%, if I have a 53% chance on these, I'm going to go for it. If I'm the guy on the floor and you give me a 50-50 shot, that's pretty damn good, compared to like 0 on my own. So I'm totally there with you. Plus, I think that one of the things I like about what we're doing here, and I've got a couple of points that I wrote down, is the information's out there. Now chiefs can use it in any way they want to look at what they're doing, what their tactics are, close before you doze, all of those things. No one's I don't think anybody is affiliated with this that I know of is trying to change the world or tell people you got to do this every time, or, now you have to do this because of this study. They're just saying, look, here's some interesting data. And you can use it to look at what you're doing and perhaps reevaluating VEIS, and all that good stuff. Here's a couple of other things to think about. So rather than look at, this many people died, the negatives, say, no, these many people were, that's a much better metric in my opinion, right? And then when we talk about 3,000 civilians, remember that my job for the last 17 years anyway has been to look at those things every year. That's not just, everybody thinks it's a house fire or an apartment fire. No, it's people who died in cars, people who died in any kind of explosion that happened, like this Tesla that plowed into the tree in Texas with nobody driving, the fire, that's going to be listed as a fire death because it was a fire in that car accident. So it'll be listed as one of those 3,000 deaths next year. Well, no, that was caused by stupidity, by letting a car drive by itself without anybody awake behind the wheel, at least double checking on that autopilot. And not to speak ill of the dead, but nobody was in the driver's seat of that car. That shouldn't be listed as a fire death. But that's when we put numbers into gross categories, that's where it gets really difficult to wrap our heads around what's really going on. So if you take that 3,000 and you go and look at the study and see where it breaks it down into how many people were in mobile homes, how many people were in cars, how many people were camping, how many of those fire deaths were forest fire deaths? They weren't structure fire deaths. They're wildland fire deaths of civilians. Remember, we had like 50 some odd people in one of those fires alone. So there's a lot of explanation for those 3,000 deaths in there, other than what firefighters normally think of as a structural, civilian fire death. There's a lot of other stuff in there. All of that being said, I think what we're looking at here that I like the most about it, and we've got a couple of great comments from the Lincoln Bureau that he agrees that this will help us to better give the public a better understanding of the impact of what we do. When you say that an 85% survival rate from VEIS, even just on 25% of those fires, and let's take that number 3,000 down to about maybe, I think it's like say 900 of those were structure fires, I think, where those people died, or let's say you go on the high side, say 1,500. Well, holy mackerel, that's a huge number of people. That's a huge number of people that possibility had a survivable opportunity. And, Micah Horna wrote in, he said, we're already training the right, left search and all that stuff, but now it gives us a chance to look at maybe some quicker, deliberate coverage, large coverage search, better idea about where the location of people might be for firefighters. And Micah makes a great point. Let's see how the numbers go over the next few years. So I think this is really great data. I think John raised some great points. We don't want to see anybody get killed in the fire, not 100, not 200. To us, nothing's acceptable, but we're never going to get there unless we, and it's tough. The Benjamin Disraeli said it best. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? So you got to get more granular, right? And when people want to obfuscate, and when people want to, politicians love to do this. They take big gross numbers rather than really, when you really look at the numbers and break it down like per 1,000 or per 100,000 or per whatever, you really get to try to understand what the real problems are. So I love this study, and I think we got to start talking about safety and survive in a different way. Like property loss. We always talk about property loss. So it's $20,000 property loss. Well, you saved a $2.5 million building. Okay, so it has $20,000 worth of damage, but you saved a $2.5 million building or a $3.5 million building. Okay, so we're still losing a certain amount of civilians, but we're rescuing maybe a far greater number. So I love the mindset.
One of the things I think that's going to benefit from this, the Project Mayday study is so amazing to me because it brought RIT operations to like everyone was talking about it, and it is talking about it, but it brought data to the table, and it really provided valuable information to say what's working, what's not working. But more than anything, what I think the value of that is that that's firemen sitting around the table talking, and that's what I think something like this does. We used in Louisville for the longest time was going through having different crews present LODD situations. And so it brings it down to your level to where you're talking about something that everyone in the room can understand, they can relate to, and then you can apply it to, yeah, we've got that kind of building, or we've had that similar situation, something like that. And so But when I sit here and think about, we had a civilian rescue last year and a half ago or so. Great fire, crews did a phenomenal job. And for us, for our department, that doesn't happen that often. So what happens though is we come out of that fire and we talk about, the crews talk about it. We might do a post-incident action, kind of and let's talk about it. But it's not an experience to the level that we share it with our neighboring jurisdiction. And we don't call up Scott over in the colony and go, hey, let me tell you what happened on this deal. We'd like to put together a little presentation, show it to the, we don't talk about it enough. And we don't share the details of those success stories enough. And I caution on the word failure, but where you ran into problems. But what I like about what you're doing right now is this brings a lot of stuff to the surface and gives people things to talk about, just like the comment that Micah Horner made, which is we're looking at this data saying that, hey, this is a target, right? Everyone uses a fish finder. No one goes out on a lake on a boat and just starts throwing hooks off the deal, right? We're going by data. We want to know what the fish finder says. We want the water temperature. We look at the whatever, the pressure and the, whatever, because we want to maximize our time and hopefully be as successful as we possibly can. And to me, that's what this does. That brings this kind of information to the table and makes everyone better at what we should be doing every day.
Can I jump in real fast? I just want to make something really, really clear is this work and our work, it's not intended at all to be directing documentation. This is not that at all. This exists to be supporting documentation and a resource just in general. I appreciate the Project Mayday project. I think it is a great tool. I think that and the firefighterclosecalls.com, they both bring to light the value of qualitative information. Terry, you talked about the line of duty deaths. They are great tools, but they're conducted by research that is secondhand and information that is secondhand. Dead men tell no tales. We'll never know the true story of what happened in a line of duty death if we don't get to hear from that person. Firefighter Rescue Survey, closecalls.com, Project Mayday, they highlight that firsthand information of the people who are directly involved in that incident. And then that is something that is really, really important for us to get. It's unfortunate that we came up with firefighterclosecalls.com before we came up with civilian fire survival calls.com. We really want to know what those people were doing beforehand, how they protected themselves, what led to their outcome, because that's what we exist for first. So I really, and then back to kind of the responses and how these changes. Chief Halton, you kind of talked about the big body of information. Yes, we have these civilian fire fatality or rescues. We have the information that 881 rescues occurred at these incidents. To highlight, breaking it down by occupancy, and here's something, again, supporting documentation. Apartment fires and multifamily dwelling fires only account for about 26% of the residential fires in the United States. They're a much smaller percentage of our fires, but they represent about 50% of the civilian rescues. So when you're in your organization, you're in a suburban department and you're trying to get it changed with your chiefs or your city council, hey, we need to have an additional engine and truck going to these apartment fires. We can now justify, we can anticipate, and I'll show you the information, apartment fires, multifamily dwelling fires that have a rescue, the incidents where a multifamily dwelling fire has a rescue, you can expect 3 victims at that incident. It was 2.8 victims for every multifamily dwelling fire with a rescue. I can also point to the fact that most rescues take 2 to 3 people to execute. So now when we're talking about an apartment fire with a rescue present, your dispatcher saying, hey, we have reports of people trapped in this multifamily dwelling, go ahead and pull the hook on the second alarm, because you're going to have 2 to 3 companies committed just to that single operation. So these are the things, again, I'm not trying to direct information. I want to provide supporting documentation. It's 100% transparent. The downside to Project Mayday is you can't see all the stories. the Firefighter Rescue Survey.com. You go on the website, you can pull up the spreadsheet right now, sort through it however you want. We just want to be a resource. We don't want to be a dictator.
Well, the other thing I liked about it too, Brian, John, and you'll like this, is that he's broken down a lot of the factors. So in other words, time, survivability rate by the amount of time before they were able to affect the rescue or the removal. So you've got like the survivability rate, obviously within 6 minutes was the highest. And you can see as time goes on, you know, the longer we were on scene, the lower obviously it went. And when you think about, when we talk about, you know, trying to justify the folks we have on our rig, Scott, you know, the data is right there that if it's 3 people and we've got to get it done in 6 minutes and we're sending out rigs with just 3 people on them, you know, we've got to get at least 3 rigs to these working fires if we're going to get 1 person out in that 6-minute time frame. You know, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you could take a lot of this, Brian, I think, and, you know, cross over, because I love the last set. I love what you did when you broke it down, you know, I think it's search and rescue operations survival rates. And just so everybody knows, when you don't download this one, it's only 17 pages and it's not a lot of words. It's a lot of, well, really, it's a lot of charts and graphs and numbers that you can use, right, Brian? I mean, it's not like it's Tolstoy. It's really, really well done. And it's got single family versus multiple family. You know, Brian, one of the things I didn't see in here, and I deal a lot with in my excuse me, I read through it quickly before we got on, but mobile home fires, you know, manufactured housing. Any idea, how did you categorize those? Did you just make them single family?
You know, in my so my collection, the total number of rescues, I pulled the occupancy type from the news report, basically, just as the U.S. Fire Administration does. When you get into the Firefighter Rescue Survey, and also to make that clear, there's two databases here that came out of this project. There's the overall collection, the quantitative data on the reports, just as U.S. Fire Administration collects. I wanted it to be as apples to apples. But then the rescue survey, when that information is put in on the rescue survey, it's put in by the responding agency or the firefighters who are involved. So when it says a mobile home on the rescue survey data, that search and rescue operations section, that is from the people who were there. So I trust that when they report a mobile home, it is in fact a mobile home. I trust that when they report a single family, it is that. I don't know, you know, we've gone through some different versions of the survey. We just got to the 3.0 version, but we're really careful to adjust the questions too much, so that we can keep a pretty consistent database. But I do think that occupancy specific data is important.
I do too. And if I could just say one last thing, and just a quick shout out to Charlie Hustle. We call him Charlie Hustle. Lloyd Mitchell photos, which you used exclusively, Brian, throughout the report. Lloyd Mitchell, John, you know Lloyd, one of the finest young men out there with a camera on the face of the planet. He's done some incredible fire photography, but he's also done some incredible photography for the city of New York. So a quick shout out to Charlie. We call him Charlie Hustle. Because he reminds me of John. Remember old Pete Rose? He's the Pete Rose of the photographer world, man. This guy, you can't hold this guy down.
I just want to spend a second as we get towards the end, and let's talk operationally, how I see this applying as a fire chief who has to support or drive policy, operating guidelines, whatever. You know, one of the things I think the fire service is really struggling or debating with now is this whole survivability profiling. You know, that's been something that we've kind of used, but now it's being challenged. And, you know, the risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little, risk nothing to save nothing. Well, to me, this gives us information along with the UL studies when they did the survivability studies and some of that starts to give us more definitive information on making those. And, you know, my concern's always been when we said those things that survivability becomes based on a philosophy and also on the experience of the person that's doing that survivability profiling. I think we're making a move to truly say we've got to occupy those searchable spaces to truly determine what is and is what's not survivable. But what I love about this and what I'm toying with, think about a size up the way we've always been taught. We size up information, or we size up what's being lost, percentage of building, the extent of fire, so on. What if we have a second part of that, where part of our size up is what is savable as far as the percentage of survivable or searchable space, however you want to look at it, and understanding the capabilities of those resources that you do have on scene, the 1, 2, 3 engines, the truck, and knowing what that can do. Does that change our posture on the fire ground significantly to where now that aggression becomes a good thing because we are addressing totally on what we're able to save or protect based on the numbers that we have? Does that make sense? Making that shift, and I said it before we came on, from a pessimistic view on survivability to optimistic. You know, and if we have a 10 by 10 bedroom and somebody's sleeping with their door closed, we have data that says there's a high probability that those people are going to survive, even if the rest of the building is totally involved, right? If we can do vent enter search into that 10 by 10, 11 by 11, 12 by 12 bedroom, the data tells us that's a high probability of survivability. I can really work with that in my operating guidelines to make that a tactical priority again.
Yeah, I mean, the information shows that 60% of our victims were removed with more than 2 rooms of fire. It was 40% of the victims removed had multiple rooms of fire, and 20% was structural involvement. And even with the structural involvement or the multiple rooms, we still had a 60% survival rate. So pretty encouraging for well-involved occupancies.
And I'll tell you, information is king, and we all know that. Data is very important. Data alone is anything alone by itself is obviously, skewed, but data is very important. So my first comment is, after listening to everybody here, so the information that you're coming up with, the conclusions and the data and the trends, right? So the question is, why, if fire reports all around the country, volunteer departments, combination departments, big city departments, everybody does fire reports, right? If fire reports have, the cause and the location and how many ounces of liquid and how many square feet and all this other nonsense, what, obviously how many people were killed, why don't they have rescues on there? Why isn't that an established part of fire reports? That would avoid having to have the how many people are rescued.com stuff that people have to voluntarily put in or be talked into submitting to, and I think all these programs are great. The close calls and near misses and all that is wonderful stuff, but it's still just the folks that send it in. Imagine the folks that don't send it in. And the same thing goes for you, Brian, for yours is, some people do report. My volunteer fire department had 2 rescues just recently. I didn't report it to anybody. Nobody called me, nobody asked me. I didn't think about it until we're sitting here today, and I'm gonna track that down. 2 people were removed, 1 died and 1 survived, and that was pretty dramatic stuff for us in a small volunteer fire department. But the point is, I don't question your documents or your facts or your numbers or your data, but you yourself said, gee, I wonder how many people, actually report it versus don't report it. Could all of your numbers be double or triple or half of what you actually have?
I'll be honest with you, Chief. I can confidently say that we are under-reporting. I think the fire service's humility is a major detriment. I can promise you that we only capture them from the news and we only capture them from follow-up. But how powerful is that, sir? Probably it gives me goosebumps to think that firefighters are saving civilians at a rate of 10 per day, and that's a conservative estimate.
And those VES numbers that you said and a couple of other numbers are pretty dramatic, for folks like us and Scott and Bobby and Rick to use in our arguments and our discussions about tactics and what we should be moving towards or maybe moving away, VES being one of them, right? So number one is, I don't know what the process is, but maybe this can help us in the process of getting victims removed, victims rescued on fire reports. So it's at least it's a national standard. At least everybody will be doing it, even if just checking boxes off and we start to get fully documented stuff. The one last point I want to make, Bobby, is, and Scott mentioned it as well, I'm sure you're well aware of it, is I have 100 questions that are not answered when I pull up to a fire. So many people say, oh, what about the guy in the closed room? You even just said it. What about, people that are rescued when there's 2 rooms, when the building is not fully involved? There are so many stories of people that are rescued. You shouldn't be allowed by law to say fully and involved in the same sentence. You know what I'm saying? Because I have cops reporting fully involved. And did you notice how dark it got here? It's storming outside. The sun was out when we started, and now it's raining out there. But my point is, I don't care what you think when you're standing in front of a building. I've had debates with guys in my own job about victim profiling, and you know what? It doesn't look like nothing. I've seen guys go into the only window that didn't have fire coming out of it and pull somebody out. You know what I'm saying? So is the flames coming out of a window? Is that the room of origin, or is that the second room that's on fire? Is the room of origin 2 rooms in? We make these presumptions and these discussions and these observations from the outside of the building, and we know absolutely nothing about what's going in. But your numbers are true. If people are being rescued, they're being rescued. They can't be denied. And if people are dying, they're dying. So our civilian fire death numbers are what they are, and it's nice to at least hear. I thought we were failing, to tell you the truth. I thought the American Fire Service really needed to do, and I think we still need to do more work on victim removal, saving people. But I really didn't realize that many folks were being rescued on a regular basis. So I think this is fantastic information.
So, and I'll add to that, John. I think that we're doing so much better than I think people realize, because the lethality of what fires are like today. In other words, when you have a sofa on fire, it's emitting enough cyanide gas in the first 3 or 4 minutes to make it a 1-step death. In other words, you get close enough to open cell foam, that's really off-gassing heavily because of the radiant heat from the other side of the sofa. The number 1 gas is that hydrogen cyanide. And if you get a good enough belly full of that, nothing short of the good Lord's going to bring you back. And so we struggle with the lethality of the products of combustion today, as well as the actual heat release rates that we hit. But one of the things I would caution everybody on is that read the damn papers. In other words, download Brian's paper and read it. Read it and read his article that he did for us. What was it, a couple of months ago, Brian? We published.
Yes, sir. In December, that was a setup for the survey. It was fire service wins and losses, and it really hits on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So go to December. Subscribe today for $47.95. I had to go there. So, but no, that's why a subscription to fire engineering is really valuable, because in December, Brian kind of threw it out there. This is what we're doing, and he got a great reaction. And the men and women who read things like fire engineering and Firehouse and the other trade pubs, those people care. They're involved. They're serious. And that's how we keep this moving forward, right? We stay with the folks that really want to do the work. And the reporting's getting better too, John, just so you know that some of the latest iterations, we are capturing, people removed or rescued and their condition, like N4s. And now with reporting being much easier to do, because we can do, voice recognition software, the officer doesn't have to sit there at 2 o'clock in the morning on his, 10th report or 12th report of the night, trying to get all that information in there. And then it goes into a file, and then somebody's got to pull it out. Now with the computers, and we can extract things much more readily. So it's going to get better and better. But I think that I would implore people, because I hear all the time about survivability profiling, and I can't find 22 people who've read it, right? I hear everybody, but they haven't read it, and they haven't read the follow-up to it. Marsar's a brilliant guy, and that's a well-written piece of work. That's a good piece of work. I don't think we'd be having this discussion if he hadn't written that. And I think that's 13, 14 years ago that he wrote that paper. And that's a brilliant piece of work. It's a good piece of work. And nowhere in there was he encouraging anybody to, stand outside because there was fire in the building. That's not what he said. He was looking at heat release rates, and really, it was before we were really talking a lot about. You got to remember, he wrote that before we were doing a lot of modern fire behavior training, and before that, it was before a lot of the stuff that because we always assumed that everybody knew then what we know now, right? But they didn't, right? So the decision-making process, it's a really good paper. It's long, but it's really worth reading. And this is only 17 pages, I'll say again. And Brian was smart enough to put a lot of really great photos in it, which I thought also, the layout's even good. It's really well done.
Hey, Chief, I will say, back to the survivability profiling and this, and even Chief Salka, you said you thought we were failing, and really, we only know what we know, and when all we have to access as a resource is negative inputs, all we can tell you is these civilians are dying here, these firefighters are dying here. It results in a pessimistic view of it all. And I'm telling you that is the ultimate thing here, man. I've been in the fire service my entire life. I'm 41 years old. To look back at the National Fire Protection information and see that in 1980, I had a better chance at surviving a house fire than I do today in the civilian fire fatality rate per 1,000 fire, it scares me. It means that my life's work has been dedicated to something that has not had a positive impact. But going forward, if we start tracking the rescues, in 40 years from now, when my son's in the fire service, we look back and I say, hey, man, you guys are doing things right. You guys have increased the civilian rescue rate by this much over your course of your career. Thank God. I may not be around to see the impact of this, but that's not the point. It's to lead things in a better direction. We have firefighters coming into the organization, and we need them to know that their future will have an impact. Their training has value. The whole point of this is to provide more purpose with people. And when we are constantly negative messaging, that's not providing people purpose. And as they say, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And if we don't keep driving, then we're going to run out of gas.
And I would say too, there's two things. The only life is only good if you evaluate it. And remember that back in the 80s, our data collection, Brian, was so awful. It was more awfuler than it is right now. So, so those numbers might be, even they might have been better, is all I'm saying. And the other thing to remember too is that, the heat release rates have just gone up exponentially too, and lethality, again, is not to beat a dead horse, but that's there too. But to your point, what I love about this, and I'll say it again, let's look at it differently. You know what I mean? Let's not try to measure something by the absence of something else. Let's measure something by what we can measure: actual rescues and removals. You know what I mean? Because you looked at real rescues, but if you added removals, as like maybe possible rescues and asterisks, could you imagine what the numbers would be? We were probably rescuing 1,000 people a day if the rescue is just a removal, getting them out of a potentially lethal area. So I think it's fantastic work, and I think that it's really, really worth reading. And now I'm going to throw you under the bus and say I'm looking forward to working with you through 2022 and collecting a full year's worth of data, so that it can be even better. And to John's point, and to your point too, is that one of the problems we're having today is that we live in the land of lawyers today. You know what I mean? And a lot of people are afraid to share their information and their data because they're so worried about getting sued. You're worried about even giving a fire report because you're worried about somebody's going to say, well, you said that Tommy was on line 2, but Tommy was actually on line 4, so I'm going to sue you. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's like behind every fire truck today is 4 lawyers and a camera crew. So but it's true. We used to be sacrosanct. We used to be a sacred cow, but not anymore. So fire chiefs are becoming really risk adverse to getting sued. So that's part of the whole getting data and getting people to cooperate and contribute. Some of that blocks us. You know what I mean? Some of that unnecessary stuff. I think this is, I loved reading it. I think it's a great read. It's really well written. Not a lot of big words, John, and no history. There's no Augustus III or Marcus Unawaris doing anything.
Can you show us your degree, Bobby? I don't see it. Can you show us that piece of paper?
Hey, I got a PhD. I don't know why everybody walks around saying they're so proud of their PhDs. I don't get all this. I've had one for years. It's no big deal. A public high school diploma is easy to get. And all you got to do is go to the GED office and answer a few questions, and you'll get a PhD. You'll get a public high school diploma. You can put it on your wall, and it's right there. So this is a great report.
So as the wheels start coming off of this thing, Brian, I can't tell you enough. I appreciate you coming on. I also appreciate you giving us the rushed out version, and I do appreciate that, and I do want to give you the opportunity moving forward. If somebody wants to contribute to this, if they want to provide information, if they want to kind of be a part of what you're doing next, how do they do that?
Well, my projects, as far as capturing the number of rescues, is wrapping up in this report in school. And while we joked about the the degree and that type of stuff, I do want to say, and I am proud of continuing my education. It doesn't mean I'm going to be throwing away my Halligan bar to put on a bow tie. But I'll be completely honest. I mean, I'm a training chief at a fire department. I'm responsible for the training, education, and professional development of 85 firefighters in improving our operation as an organization. And as a professional educator, essentially, I need to seek that professional education, and I'm hopefully filling the right shirt in the right way and continue to advance my studies and share that with other people to help contribute to that. So I'm just as thankful to the fire service as I am to Oklahoma State University in advancing me in that way. But as far as contacting me, brianebrush@gmail.com, that's my personal email. But really, as far as the process and progress goes from here, it's firefighterrescuesurvey.com. That is the continued source for the submission of rescues. As Chief Salka said, he can enter them. They don't have to be current. We will take any rescue information. Once it goes into the database, it will be sorted by year. We want to capture as much information we can about firefighters making a difference in civilian outcomes.
So, and to Brian's point, John is a huge proponent of higher ed. I'm a huge proponent. I had my degree when I got here, and I've continued to study. The day you stop studying, you're in trouble, period. And I don't care what you're studying. I didn't get my degree in fire science. It didn't exist when I got my degree. Now you can get a degree in fire studies, which is excellent. But it didn't even exist when I came on the job. Today it does. And I came on with my degree. So I did. But I've continued to study. I just wrapped up a course 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm signed up for 2 more. And there's a lot of good free stuff out there. If you go to Hillsdale College, they've got at Liberty University, there's a ton of free education out there. Stillwater has free stuff on their line. Vanderbilt, Harvard, Yale, Duke. You can go just about anywhere you want and take their free offerings online. And I think that's really important stuff, but the integration of education and tradesmanship, that's what makes the world go round. Like, you can't be a good plumber if you don't understand hydraulics. Seriously, you can't be a good plumber if you don't understand how all of that works, right? And the science behind it. You can't be a carpenter if you don't understand physics and geometry. So education is the fundamental key of all good endeavors. But what's also fundamental is that you have to wade through a lot of data to get to the data that matters. And what Brian has done here is, this is data that matters. Where did we find people? What condition were they in? How long did it take? How many people did it take to move them? And all that data is in here. And I think that the study is going to continue, Brian. I know that you've continued, you finished this part, but the continuation of this data collection and the evaluation of this data has to continue. And whether Oklahoma State wants to continue to do it, or whoever wants to continue to do it, I think it can't just stop here. Does that make sense?
Great job, Brian.
Yep, I appreciate it. Hey, folks, you can reach out to Chief Salka, Chief Thompson, Bobby Halton, myself, and then certainly reach out to Brian if you've got any questions. And we encourage you to get this report. You can get that. It was posted today by Fire Engineering, but you can get this report, read it. It's fascinating, and I'm sure that you'll find it as interesting as this panel did. We like to always end our shows by saying thank you to the men and women of the military, the armed forces out there serving every day. We appreciate that, and always remember that never forgetting means never forgetting. Our next show is third. I'm sorry, I had to jump in a car because I have to be at a meeting. So I'm actually in my car and not sitting in front of my computer. I don't even have the date for our next show, but third Wednesday is when you'll find this panel. Third Wednesday of each month, and you can find great shows every Wednesday on this platform. So thanks for tuning in, and everyone be safe.